Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are talking about the Synergy 3. This will be my full review and discussion, so I'll add a little bit more detail and I'll kind of tell you what I've discovered as I've carried this over the last few months. Before I get into that, I'll just say, there's a lot of history along with this knife and this design. In fact, it was like the first integral knife made back in the 90s. Really, really lots of cool, interesting stuff. But I won't get into all that here because I've already covered it in my previous video about the WE Knives Synergy, and so I will put a link to that at the end in the end card. Maybe I'll just put it. Actually, you know what? I'll put that video at the end, so you can just click on it and find it there. For this video, we're going to sort of bypass all that because there are a couple other reasons actually that I was interested in this. First of all, I was pretty curious about the milling that they'd done on this. We don't see a lot of attention given to this milling detail from Civivi. Most of the time it's just sort of slabs of G10 over steel. So I was really curious about that. And the construction here, this is only steel on the liner lock side and nothing on the G10 side, which is a pretty neat approach. The other thing I have to say is this is a fairly thick, robust handle that we, don't see often from Civivi. So for all those reasons, I was pretty curious about this knife, and so that's why we're looking at it. The other thing I will say is, and I'm going to put this out there right away, and I'll probably say it again at the end. The biggest and coolest thing about this knife is that construction. This is a very robust, hand-filling, confidence-inspiring knife, and I really, really hope that we see more of this approach from Civivi. So I think I mentioned that in my first impressions. I want to reiterate it now, and I'll probably mention it at the end again. So now so that's the main reason I got this knife. That's the main reason I'm sharing it with you guys. So let's go in and get into some of the typical review stuff. First off, size and weight. This is 7 and 11/16, so just a little under 7 3/4. 3 and 3/16 on the blade. So that's too short for me. This knife overall is a little small for my preferences, but that's okay. Because of all those things that I already said, I was still curious to check it out. 4.5 inches is the closed length. This is going to weigh 3.6 ounces, so that's kind of, it's a fairly hefty little knife in your pocket. And the grip area is around 3 5/8, and you can see how it kind of extends all the way. You get to use the whole handle here, and I've got enough space, but just barely. And perhaps if this were a little bigger, if this was the size of the original knife, the WE Synergy that it was based on, you might not notice the pocket clip as much either. And I will say ergonomically, that's a point that'll come up. All right, so that's size and weight. Let's go ahead though and talk about the blade first of all. Nitro V steel, stonewash finish, reasonably thin behind the edge, reasonably thin blade stock that's nicely crowned, very distinctive design here. Now, I have to offer this criticism, and I know what I'm about to say makes no sense at all because it would be a complete adulteration of the design. But if this were just a plain drop point blade and you could move this grind up, it would actually thin this out quite a bit and offer better performance. And so while I get that being faithful to the original design is pretty important in a knife like this because of its historical significance, I feel like, I don't feel like I would suggest that we could be a little more practical about this if they changed the blade a bit. And so I know I know that's almost sacrilegious to say, but changing this blade shape to a drop point or even just a regular standard Tanto blade style without sort of that upswept curve in the back would actually, I think, benefit the practicality of this blade a bit. Now, as it stands, because it's fairly thin blade stock, it's not bad, okay? But you can see there's not a lot of distance here. So you're still, even in fairly thin blade stock, getting a rather abrupt angle there. And so flattening that out, thinning it out would be beneficial. Although, let me say this, in use, this has actually been pretty good. Now, Nitro V steel is the steel on here, and Nitro V steel is okay steel. It's not gonna, it's not a super steel. It's not anything crazy in terms of edge retention, but it's fine. And it is very corrosion resistant. So that's a nice feature. So that's my discussion of the blade. I know I know my comment there about changing the blade shape is a little out of place for this particular knife because the design is one of the things that makes this cool. I'm going to let it stand though as it is. Let's move on to the action. Lockup and deployment on this is pretty nice. The detent here and the functioning of this flipper tab is very nice. Really snappy deployment. And this is pretty typical of Civivi. This is good even as Civivis go. Really nicely done. There's a little bit of a, the lock bar could be a little more accessible. I do find myself having to fight with it a little bit, but it's not that bad. And the flipper tab is quite minimal and yet still works really great. That just fires out of there with a lot of authority, which is a whole lot of fun. So I've got to give full points for action, even if the ergonomics of the lock bar are maybe not amazing. Okay, it is bearings, so I mean pretty typical Civivi stuff otherwise, but just want to note slightly stiffer detent, but very snappy and very satisfying. All right, we move to the handle here, and I've already made a couple of points, but there's more to say about this handle. First of all, this milling pattern, sort of the concentric circles going out, is really good. Like, it's just the perfect amount of grip. It's not uncomfortable at all, but it's really just gives you a nice feel in hand, and overall really great. So this is one of the features. So let's start making a little list here. Feature number one that I would really want to see Civivi use more frequently is this fully textured handle. Really nicely done. Feature number two on this handle that I'd love to see again from Civivi is this robust G10 that's very hand filling, but also nicely contoured. All right. Point number three, or feature number three, that I would really love to see from Civivi again is the liner lock only construction, where there's a nested steel liner here, but on this side it's straight G10. The knife, it doesn't sacrifice any toughness, but it does lighten things up a bit. And then we've got this nice G10 backspacer. So this construction is really good, and I have to, like, the knife deserves some extra points for that, even if you don't love some of the other things about it. Finally, under handle construction, we've got to talk a little about the clip. It's the typical Civivi deep carry clip. It's completely fine, but it's not what I would call amazing or anything like that. And then the feel in hand is good, but similar complaint to what I had about the Wii Knives Synergy is this bump seems a little out of place. Like my finger lands on it and it's okay. It seems like the knife is designed to be held way back here like this, so my hand is really far away from the blade, which I don't like. I want my hand up here as close to the blade as it can possibly be. And I mean, that should just be a standard thing for all knife designs. More control is better, therefore closer to the blade is better. You've got to do something to make sure that you're keeping your finger off the blade, but that's my really only ergonomic complaint. It's not the most comfortable, and you can feel the clip a little bit, but generally speaking, it's decently comfortable. So I'm not complaining about comfort. I'm just, I kind of have to hold it with my thumb up here, which is, it feels like it's not meant to be there. And when it comes to assessing ergonomics, I want a knife to feel like it belongs in my hand, and this one doesn't quite get there. Now, thinking of that, let's give a couple of examples. I wanted to bring this knife in because here's a knife that is also, it's built by Wii. It is on the smaller side, but I love it. And one of the reasons is it does feel like it was meant to be in my hand. I do have a bit of a choil there, so I can choke up if needed. The blade stock is really well balanced here. And this doesn't cost very much more. I think these were like 115 bucks or something like that. And that's something we'll talk about again as well. So let me throw in a few comparisons. This one is not super comparable. I'll throw in a Para 2 just because everyone's familiar with it. All right, so you can see this is a little smaller than the Para 2, although the cutting edge is might even be a little more cutting edge than the Para 2, but it's close. Let's CJRB Feldspar. Okay, another sort of budget-friendly, well-built knife. Where's the scoria? I've got a scoria here as well. The scoria I wanted to bring in just because it's sort of, the feldspar I think is around 50 bucks. The scoria is around 70, which kind of raises a question that this knife raises. So this has got some extra stuff that I talked about liking. I like the handle construction. There's some things that they've done right for sure. Um, does it justify added cost? And the Scoria is a knife that kind of raises a similar question. Really nice contoured handle here, great knife, and a couple of little upgrades with the titanium pivot collar and clip. So here they're asking for, I think, around $70. Here they're asking for like 90 bucks for Nitro V steel and for a liner lock. That becomes hard to justify. Here's another example. This is the Kaiser XL button lock bag letter. Man, that's a lot of B's. And again, I'm bringing it in more because they're asking for a little more money. I think this is around $70. This is around 70. And so, as a consumer, you've got to ask, am I willing to pay extra for, now this is 154 cm steel, dual row ceramic bearings, and a button lock. Are those features worth the extra money? And by the way, it's a well done button lock and a well thought out button lock. And so some of these knives I bring in to kind of ask that question. And so that's one thing when we hit on comparisons here, I've got to complain. The price is a little high on this. It just feels like they're reaching probably more than a lot of consumers are willing to pay. So that's my sort of comparison discussion. There are a lot of budget alternatives out there that will have similar performance but are not going to cost you as much, and that's definitely something that needs to be considered. Finally, in conclusion, this is a well-built knife. It's a nice design, historically significant design. The action on this is pretty superb, although I did complain about the liner lock. It's not super bad. Very cool construction, certainly a different offering from Civivi. And if you love the design and you love some of those features that I highlighted, this is probably worth it for you. But if you're just looking for a decent, comfortable, usable folding knife, and the design isn't that compelling to you, there are probably better options that I would steer you toward. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to check out White Mountain Knives. That's where I got this. You could get one for 10% off if you use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, and that also helps the channel. All right, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.